Okay, well, that worked.
Good.
Send an email to folks. If for whatever reason the computer decided not to remember my login stuff for the church YouTube channel, which erased some of the stuff. Okay, so.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hey,
How are you?
How are you?
wow, good.
I'm just painting.
Long time no see. Yeah.
What's the weather like in in Philly? You in Philly? Where are you, Ros?
Oh, yeah, I'm in Philly. I'm in Bernathen, and it's a slightly cool evening. When I say cool, like instead of being in the I can't think in Celsius,
No,
but
it's all right. I can do.
it's probably around 20, which is chilly for us in the evening these days. But it's fine. It's not raining. How about you? You're up there. And,
We're crawling out of winter, so it's okay.
yes. Oh, okay.
But it's I don't know, early 20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
21,
Probably similar.
22, something like that. So
Nice.
You can't see me? Aww.
in your money, that would be.
Can you hear me?
Ooh.
I'm talking. Can you hear me? Because you can't see me.
See,
can-
20s.
We can hear, but we can't see.
It's Lori. Hi, how are you?
I know that, Laurie. Nice picture of the ceiling.
Oh,
Yes.
God.
The
Yeah.
windows look great. The
The windows.
tree outside looks
Yeah.
ghostly.
Spring. Spring is springing.
Not Jack
Oh,
Rand.
good.
It's okay.
Oh, good.
It's not sunny.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
drizzly.
there's
Oh,
Roz.
great.
Yeah, there's
Look
Claire.
well.
G'day.
Hello, Roz. Looks well. Look at that.
Hello, everyone. I hear voices that I cannot see faces for, but hello.
Yeah, it was sunny and it's snowing and now it's muggy.
Oh, wow.
Hello, Rose. This is Margaret.
Hi, Margaret. How's it going?
Good.
Good.
I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours, but I don't think I better start.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll give the John and Angela update, which you probably know, and Evie, they are in Michigan at the moment.
Oh, are they? I didn't know. At Linden Hills or?
Hi, Murray.
No, they went to visit Harvey in Davison, Michigan, which is just, a nothing place, if I may say so.
Or maybe.
Just a place.
Right.
Let's see if we can get this to start working.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi.
Jennifer.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very good picture.
Yeah, that's because it's a footwork. But I mean,
It's not the real.
yeah,
Is Patricia coming?
Yeah.
Oh. Laurie's chest.
Yeah, that's what she wants to be doing. That's how she wants to be
I
seen.
would just be sewing here. You admire.
Right.
Whoever's hiding
Margaret.
behind. Oh, I was going to say.
Oh, there we go.
Hello, everybody. It's Cliff. How you going, Roz, everyone?
Hi,
Hi, Cliff.
hi, Cliff.
It's
Good to see your hand waving.
You're looking well.
And I think you are too, from what I can see
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. That made my day.
off camera.
Yeah. Only so much we can do with this lens, but it's better to see somebody than nobody.
Thank you. It looks great. Is it a wide angle lens or something?
No, it's just a standard lens. There's nothing exotic about it. Works
Oh, okay.
for most things, but not necessarily for wide angle shots.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is there a story behind the hair?
Oh, Thursday, we're talking to.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Is anybody familiar with this? Can you see that?
Swedenborg in the house. Okay.
Yeah.
By Alfred Wynne Acton.
Oh,
No, no.
I've heard of it, but where was it published?
I don't know if I can tell you exactly where he's
Ah.
in the House of. It's got something to do anyway with the House of Nobles and Swedenborg's papers that he wrote about. I'll try and send you if I.
Okay.
It. I've just read it and I can't really describe.
To the 16th.
Gay, where'd you get that from?
Well, actually, Ken sent it to me to say, maybe you're interested in this. What did he write? These papers are from the Finnish House of Nobility, their website, Riddarhuset, Finland. And he thought that we might be interested. It is interesting too. A little bit of history, but it's more about the what they called memorials. They were papers that he submitted to the Swedish Diet during Charles II's time, and one on the mining and trade, and establishment of rolling mills.
Come on.
Steel mills, and being anti-war.
Oh, wow.
Proffered 3 remedies to build up and improve the merchant marine, to examine the nature, quality and quantity of all the goods which are imported from abroad, and to what extent they are necessary and indispensable to us, and to see how the works and manufactories in the country may be protected and promoted so as to produce better results in regard to cheapness, quality and quantity. And then he refers to one document 474. Anyway, I'll send it to Todd,
There you go.
the answer of all things.
That's how I wish to be known.
And you can take it from there.
All right. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and get started. So look at this. I've arranged the camera so you can't see me. All right. Well, that's all right. So just a little bit of a preamble, because what I find in this subject is the world's gotten pretty touchy about this. Super sensitive on how we see these things. And, our goal here isn't to justify hatred towards a person. We're not trying to say somebody's going to hell. We're just trying to say, is this a good idea or a bad idea? And we're looking at what do the writings say about it. I'm not interested in what an academic study says about it. I don't care what modern psychology says about it. That is not the point of this class.
You just want to say what the title is actually before you do all that.
Yeah, well, the title is, what do the writings say about LGBT behaviors? Right? That is what we are looking at. So somebody could say, I don't believe what the writings say about this, and walk away with a different conclusion. And that's fair. But for the point of this is we're just trying to say, well, what do the writings say about it? You
Can I
know,
just say one thing?
sure.
I've been reading quite a few of the things in New Church Life,
Mhm.
and I get the idea that a lot of people interpret what the writings say differently. So you can say this is what the writings say, but
Well, that's the main
that's
point.
the whole point, isn't it? You
That's
know,
the point of
what
this-
do they really say?
Yeah, and that's the point of this class, is to look at some of those kind of arguments and say, well, do they actually hold up? So, yeah, this is going to take some going through, because there are a number of different arguments people lay out there. Well, do the writings really say this? Does the Bible really mean that? You know, that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of the point, is to look at this. I'm gonna share my PowerPoint. I always lose the share screen. It's the one that's right in front of me. The one that's lit up. All right, so share. Okay. So hopefully everybody can see this now. All right. So to me, this is a picture of the job of the priesthood. This is what's given to us in the book of Leviticus about how to deal with sores. And it's a flow chart, and it's, how can I make this go away? Well, it drags the PowerPoint.
Wait, why is it sore?
Sorry.
Why? It's just.
I'm just, it's an example.
Okay.
So in the book of Leviticus, you get all these different rules and stuff, right? Of, you know, how you cleanse yourself. And so we have the job of the priesthood is diagnosis. People are sick with a skin disease. They come to the priesthood, and the priest says, well, is it more than skin deep? Yes or no? And if it is, then this is the process we go through here. And the point of having a topic on a class on this topic is diagnosis. Somebody presents, we'll say, with the conditions of homosexual behavior or whatnot, and this is what we are trying to do, diagnosis. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? If it's a bad thing, how bad is it? You know, and that kind of stuff. That's how my brain sees this as the job. And there's what I would call, what Margaret alluded to, is the longer process, right? You have a big process of looking at all the different teachings or statements in the writings about this. And then you have to determine what they mean, right? That's a long process to pick through all these things. For me, I in my mind goes to a shorter process, and I'll walk you through my shorter process first, and then we'll do the long process second. So, as alluded to, the question in my mind is, well, is this good or bad? From there, I look at what do the scriptures say? It says, I'm not going to read everything on all these slides. Mostly going to focus on the underlying stuff. Male and female, he created them. All right. So we know that we're male and female. Be fruitful and multiply. And we see that the purpose of the human race was to create angels. You create angels through men and women. If you go through the plan the Lord has, you see there should be one husband, one wife. Male and female were created to be the very image of marriage. Plenty of quotes throughout the scriptures and the writings saying one man, one wife, or one man, one woman, one husband, one wife, however you want to do it. You have this everywhere. There's tons of quotes. And so the picture is, well, what's God's plan for us? God's plan for us is a man and a wife, a husband and a wife. We have a teaching in conjugal love saying the atmosphere of conjugal love is the essential atmosphere of heaven. So that marriage love is essential to the fabric of heaven. Heaven and the church are with all who have conjugal love and with nobody else. So conjugal love's a big deal. Fundamental love. And so, again, I'm going through this quickly, but this is my short process. In my mind, as in heaven, so upon the earth. That is our goal. if the goal is men and women together, and it doesn't exist same-sex relations in heaven, how can we say it's good? And when I talk to the priesthood, while there's some divergence of opinion about how we deal with it in this world, everybody comes to the same conclusion. Well, homosexuality doesn't exist in heaven. You might have a homosexual in this world who makes it to heaven, but homosexuality in and of itself doesn't exist in heaven. If it doesn't exist in heaven, to me, that's saying this is not a heavenly behavior, right? So that's my short process. Going, okay, if it doesn't belong in heaven, it can't be good. If it's not good, well then, how bad is it? Is it minor evil, big evil? Is it something we have to care about, something we don't have to care about? We get into all these other things. And I think a lot of people struggle around the whole issue of blame. You know, somebody presents, I'm a guy who loves a guy. Well, is it his fault? Is it, not his fault? What does he have to do? There's all these sub questions that come after the fact. But I think we have to figure out if we're starting on the same basis of, is this good or not? If it's good, we don't have to do anything. Just go for it. Let it roll. If it's not, though, well, then we're in a different ballgame. And that's I think the hard part is, okay, if you say it's not good, well, then what? But anyway, so that's my short process. I'll pause here. And does anybody want to comment on a critique of this process or a love of this process? Either. I mean,
Nothing to explain, short and sweet, isn't it, really, when you think about it?
it's not super complicated.
Well, I think it is complicated.
Okay.
You're talking about the homosexuality, you're talking about is it good or bad? But I think the whole issue in the world is about people. It's about the people.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's the secondary questions, though.
yeah, so I personally kind of come from that angle, from the people. And I can't judge what people are doing. And if you start saying it's good or bad, you're immediately judging those people.
Nope, you're not.
Well, you are in a way.
Nope. No, you're not. And that is exactly the problem that we have in culture, because you can't say something's wrong without people saying you hate them. And that is not what I'm saying.
Good point.
If you start smoking, I can love you and say smoking's not good for your health. I don't have to care about whether you do it or not, but it is a judgment that some things are right and some things are wrong. That is true. Whether you're judging a person spiritually as to whether they're a good person or not, no, you can't do that. And the writings are very clear. But you do have to make judgments as to whether behavior is good or not. The writings are clear.
Picking on these people. That's what I feel that the world is. Has picked on these people. They've been victimised. They've been murdered. All sorts of things. And now society is kind of accepting them. And I agree. It's not the ideal way of living. But I do feel that it's a very delicate situation, because you're going to have all sorts of different opinions, and
Right.
compassion is the big one. Compassion, and I said the Lord is merciful above anything else. So you hit the people with the truth. This is the truth. You've got
Correct.
to have the other with it.
Correct. And we get to that later.
Good.
But we have to start at this, from a very basic point.
I will say though that this is me speaking personally, and what I'm saying is really me thinking out aloud, because probably everybody here is trying to deal with in their own mind. They've got family, friends, you know people. So
Yep.
trying to be fair and just. So when I talk, I might sound a bit, confronting, but it's me trying to come to an answer for myself. I have to go through this when you have to vote.
Here.
Government, everything. So
So the marriage.
the marriage. So, but I still haven't felt I'm 100% where I would like to be.
Look, the reason this issue is so sensitive is because what you just said, everybody knows somebody who's involved in this. And we can all say, oh, well, I know so-and-so, and they're such a nice person. How could this be a evil behavior? Or how could this, that kind of stuff. And that's the most compelling argument that side has. But you can also know people who do other things that aren't good for themselves, and you don't hate them because they do these things, but it's still not ideal. I mean, there are people who go out there and they have a short temper and they spout off on a whim. Is that a good behavior? No. Do we still have friends with that person? Yeah. I mean, this is the same thing. And that's kind of where it goes back to, well, then, like, how, if this is not ideal, how bad is it? But again, I knew this was going to happen.
Nigel, can I actually say something about that? I'm not into sort of conspiracy type things. I always look at both sides. I don't agree with this thing as in, look, if you look at what we've up there, I mean, it's a man and a woman, that's it, I mean, this idea where these people now, these radicals in this homosexual community are getting into schools, having men come in dressed up as women with beards, reading story time and telling people there's no he and she, and telling people that they're not babies, they're babies, giving kids hormone blockers and stuff like that. This is where it's leading, and this is what worries a person like myself. This is where it's leading to. I don't want, if I had kids, I wouldn't want a lesbian school teacher telling my kids about all this baby stuff and all this other nonsense. Well, sorry, this is that's it.
Right, but you're drifting us off topic.
All right, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm just saying that's what it's leading to,
I understand the frustration, and I don't want to get into my opinion versus your opinion.
Yeah, I understand that too, and that's all it is.
So
usually it's one opinion against another.
So, all right. Well, we're going to go back to the writings here, and I'll reshare. So,
And I think what you said, and we just need to make clear, is that we're judging behavior, we're not judging people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Exactly.
right. Correct. Yeah, and I think people should be aware that we are told specifically not to judge spiritual outcomes. That's fair. But you are allowed to judge whether behavior is good or not. So that said, let's look at the direct teachings that we have in the writings about this. Again, I'm not going to read everything here. I wish I could make that go away. But anyway, there's 2 slides of this. So you have, all right, whatever. So the big ones are these first 2. Arcana Celestia 22:20 and 23:22. It says it's an evil of a very bad form of adultery. Now this one takes some hits because if you look at the Eliot or the Potts official translations, it's translated as the evil of the worst form of adultery. I've changed it to very bad because from what I've learned from my Latin teachers is that there is no word worst. There's no superlative in the Latin. And so it doesn't really mean the worst, it means very bad. I don't know why they translated it as worst. And so this gets to kind of what Margaret was asking earlier about, well, how do you interpret, how do you interpret these things? Because what happens in this one is people say, oh, how could that be the worst? I can think of worse things than that. Well, this is the problem with a inaccurate translation. So if we change it from worst to very bad, which I think is more accurate, it does change it a bit. That particular quote you'll see later is in reference to the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So that's given in the middle of that explanation of that story.
May I ask, what term does it use in the writings for homosexuality? So it wouldn't be that.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Well, these are the terms, really, is what it is. A very bad form of adultery. The next one, a foulness that is contrary to the order of nature. 3, it's the sin of sodomy in the spiritual experiences. You get sodomites, adulteries as in Sodom, you know, and I hope, I don't want to read all these references, but I'm hoping to give you the point here that this isn't like a one-off quote. You know, the last time the clergy got so deep involved into a doctrinal discussion was the ordination of women. And there's a lot less to hang on a policy of not ordaining women than there is on homosexuality. You know, with the ordination of women, you're hanging on a few different things, but there's not tons. Versus with this topic, there's a lot of references. And you look at the second slide, we have a number of times evils too unspeakable to be named in conjugal love, abominable lewdness, foul conjunctions, foul adulteries, unmentionable sexual unions, and abominable copulation. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff directly hitting on this, saying this isn't good. This isn't good. There's nowhere it says, well, it's not so bad. You know, it's all in a very negative sense.
Can I jump in,
Sure.
please? What it's saying to me is that we are trying to force love to marry love and wisdom to marry wisdom, or truth to marry truth. Two women or two men in a relationship. And that just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's, again, we will get to that later. That is a passage that comes up where saying, yeah, this is not what it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm going to keep pushing forward because it's going to be so easy to get into the conversation when we don't have all the stuff in front of us.
Yeah, right.
It's just inevitable. Where are we? So here we are. So okay, so let's get into the objections. This is the fun part. Where what are the common arguments saying that these teachings don't mean what we think they mean? And to me, there are two categories of objections. So we've talked about this a little bit. Hey, they were born this way, right? You know, somebody's born, they've always seemed pretty gay. So, hey, how can you blame them? The one you hear a lot, love is love, right? You hear that? They're not hurting anybody. And of course, the one we mentioned already, I know somebody and they're so nice. How could this be awful, right? Those are ones, but they're not doctrinal arguments, right? Those are not doctrinal arguments. Those are arguments from the person, from the world. It's not a philosophical argument. It's just, this is what we got.
I don't think you can dismiss the first one as being not
what?
I mean, I don't know where you're going with this, but
I'm trying to.
But some people are born.
I'm trying to separate things in from doctrinal arguments to not doctrinal arguments. Like, is this an argument from the writings and the word, or is this not an argument from the writings and the word?
Doctrinal, so there's no love.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is an argument. Yeah, this is not a doctrinal argument.
See, are people born that way, or are they turned that way?
We're gonna get this way. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. I know this is hard because I'm going slow. So these 7 categories here are objections that happen via the word, and this is kind of, again, what Mark was saying earlier about what does the writings really say? Those things. Do you really interpret it that way? So these are the main ones that I came up with that I saw that were addressed in clergy meetings. And I see some of this in the outside world too. Objection. Writings do not speak about homosexuality. Is sodomy homosexuality? Homosexual rape is the problem of Sodom and Gomorrah, not homosexuality. How can homosexuality be adultery when you have, say, consenting monogamous relationships? How could that be adultery? What really makes conjugal love? Is conjugal love defined by gender, or is it defined by spiritual qualities? No harm to self and others is another one that comes to us also as a doctrinal argument. People say it's not hurting anybody. And then kind of 7 is my catch-all of other miscellaneous things, basically saying it comes into the category of don't judge. All right, that's kind of how that one shakes out. I don't, it's 11:26 already. I don't have any delusion that we're going to make it through all of this today. But we'll see how far we go, and see where we get. With any luck, we can do this. My ideally, we get through this set today and look at the next set next week, along with some other stuff next month. Yep. So that's kind of how I see this going out. But so woohoo, here we go. Objection number one: the writings don't actually address homosexuality.
Well, I do, don't they?
There are people who have put forward the idea that, well, there's no word homosexuality in the writings, therefore the writings do not address homosexuality.
Oh,
And it's true. The word homosexuality does not appear in the writings because homosexuality as a word did not exist until 1892.
didn't know that.
So yeah, so I actually saw somebody write this fairly scholarly little article saying, well, there's nowhere in the writings that talks about homosexuality. And he was going through saying it doesn't, because the word doesn't exist in there. It's true, but it's weak scholarship to say that. So to me, this is a ridiculous argument that it doesn't talk about the topic because you don't see the word. That word is not present, but it is discussed. There's just no two ways about it. It's not a very good argument, so I'm not spending much time on it, but I want you to at least know that this argument has been made, and it's been made by people who I think are smarter than me, so they should know better, but I think this is where biases and desires for outcomes come into play. Similarly, people will say, they'll take those arcana passages we looked at and they'll say, an evil not to be named isn't homosexuality. They'll say, oh, it's something else. It's rape, it's incest. They're giving it some other thing. I'm not reading through all this, but if you look, the basic idea is you look back to scholarly works of the 1700s, an evil not to be named is homosexuality. It was used in court systems because it was an impolite word to use to say somebody was a sodomite. We just didn't speak of it. So there's plenty of evidence. You can go to plenty of even, shall we say, gay-friendly websites. They acknowledge this to be true. This is not a new church guy made it up to prosecute this thing. So again, bad scholarship if you say that's not true. Similarly, for much of modern history, a crime against nature was understood by courts to be synonymous to buggery and to include, sorry to say it, anal sex and bestiality. So this goes on. You can find this on Wikipedia. Again, public knowledge. It's not really in debate, except for somebody who's trying to make an argument to say the writings don't say this is bad. It's just not true. Or trying to make the case that homosexuality isn't discussed in the writings because these terms aren't homosexuality. It's just bad scholarship.
Exactly.
If you want to do something else with these terms or do something else with your belief and say, well, I don't believe what the writings say, fine. But you can't say that the writings don't address it.
It's funny you say about words. When I was a kid, my mother would never say pregnancy. It was always expecting. Pregnancy was to her, and my grandmother was not a nice word. It wasn't a pregnant. It's true. And that's the same thing with this now. I mean, what? You're pregnant or you're expecting. It's the same thing. So I don't know.
So you don't have to like the phrase, but it is what it's talking about. So to me, this is an objection overruled. I don't think that is a fair claim to make. So that's objection number one. Objection number two is sodomy homosexuality. So you have the sort of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? You have Lot and his family inside the house, people bang on the door, and the case is made that while there's homosexual sex involved. The real issue isn't homosexuality, it's something else. So this is an interesting one. All right. If you look at Ezekiel, talks about the sin of Sodom. Look, Jerusalem, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and an abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore, I took them away as I saw fit. So people will say, well, look, Ezekiel's, this is the sin of Sodom. There's no same-sex stuff. Yeah, there's nothing there about that. So therefore, the sin of Sodom, as defined biblically, was not sexual in nature. It was, you can read the rest, is meanness, cruelty, neglect. I think that's a fair point. So someone says, well, is the sin of sodomy as defined by the Old Testament? And I say the Old Testament because the New Testament is different. As defined by the Old Testament, was it about homosexuality? Doesn't seem like it. If you look at the internal sense on the passages about Sodom and Gomorrah's story, it's about love of self. It's not specifically about homosexuality. So is this, as we see in Ezekiel, is that about love of self? Pride is kind of love of self, right? Love of, fullness of food, abundance of violence, strength, didn't strengthen the poor and the needy. It's they're about themselves. So I think there's a reasonable case to be made. The sin of Sodom, as defined biblically, was not about sexual stuff, sexual sins. The problem becomes when you now take that word Sodom and you look into other places of the writings and 1700s or 18th century culture, what did it mean there? That meant homosexuality. So you get this kind of mangled English because in some places it means something, in some places it means something else, which actually isn't uncommon in the English language. So this is where we go back to the Sodom and Gomorrah story and we say, okay, this is what the passage is. That Sodom is every evil that stems from love of self, is clear from the meaning of Sodom in the word. Although in the next chapter, it seems as if Sodom means the evil that consists in the worst, very bad form of adultery. Nevertheless, nothing else is meant by it in the internal sense than the evil that stems from self-love. So here he's addressing it, saying, you'd think sodomy is about this very bad form of adultery, but that's not really what this story is about. So I think scholarly wise, there's a clean argument saying the sin of Sodom, as defined by the Bible, isn't about homosexuality. The problem is people then say, well, then homosexuality isn't bad. That's not what it says. It says, you'd think it means what? Oh, this evil that consists of a very bad form of adultery. It's now saying this is an evil. It's not sodomy, but it is an evil. So that you can't say that the writings in the Bible say this is a good thing. It says it isn't sodomy, biblically defined, but it doesn't mean that it says this is okay. So, yeah. So when somebody objects and says, well, the writings say that Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't about homosexuality, you can say, yes, you are correct about that. I don't have a problem with that assertion. I think it's fair.
But it is about self-love.
Correct. And right, that does go down the path of, well, what is homosexuality? Is that just a manifestation of self-love? Maybe. But my point is that the writings are not defining sodomy as homosexuality. The two are not the same in the Bible, which it just isn't. The rest of the world has equated those two things. So in colloquial language, we'll see it used that way, but that's not really what the point the Bible was trying to make. So there you go. There's a score.
Self-love is loving our own image, an extension of which could be homosexuality.
Correct. I'm open to that, but that starts to become more speculation and derived doctrine than something that's very cleanly stated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Objection number 3. Homosexual rape is the real problem of the Sodom and Gomorrah story. It's that it's rape, it's not the homosexuality itself. So here's the thing. So the writings say that rape is one of the worst forms of adultery. And that's why the attempted rape at Solomon is referred to as a very bad form of adultery. So they're saying, okay, if you look in the back half of Conjugal Love, rape, very bad form of adultery. AC 22:20 says, this is a very bad form of adultery. Therefore, they're saying rape equals sin of Sodom. That's the bridge they're making. And therefore, same-sex marriage isn't a very bad form of adultery. You follow the logic there?
Yeah.
So if rape is the very bad form of adultery that's being referred to in that previous quote, then it's excusing same-sex relations. So, and this is where they'll say, if you look down the chain of what also is adultery, it's infidelity, incest, cheating on your spouse, and therefore gay marriage is none of those things. If you're not cheating on your spouse, basically, then how could it be adultery? And that kind of gets into the next objection. So that's the objection. The problem is it gets back to the scholarship of this and staying consistent with the terms of the time, because those euphemisms that Swedenborg used as crime against nature, stuff like that, they were commonly used in those days to mean homosexuality. And we do have in the back of Conjugal Love a section on rape. Rape is not a crime not to be named. So if we can name it, you would think Swedenborg would have said in AC 22:20, you would think Sodom is about this, but it's really about rape, right? But he doesn't say that. It says about this crime not to be named. All right, so he's using the language of the time. And I don't think this holds up very well, I guess is what it comes down to for me. Rape's not a nice thing. Nobody's arguing that. But for whatever reason in the 18th century, you could name that directly, but you couldn't name homosexuality. So I think that's, again, a stretch to try to make that argument that the story Sodom and Gomorrah is about the homosexual rape, and that's the key thing. I just don't see that it's there.
Can I ask a question, Todd?
Yep.
Do you use the Hebrew dictionary when, big fat book, when you're looking at the meaning of words?
I do not. Well, on rare occasion, if I'm using something to figure out the meaning of it, I will look at a literal translation or a Kempton translation, something that does the translating for me, but it's a more literal version of it.
Right.
I don't know enough Hebrew to be qualified to make that call.
But in the Hebrew Bible, as we know, so many different aspects of one word can be a definition of that one word. Like a building, it could be a house or a hovel or a palace.
Right.
Very simple example. So I'm wondering exactly what does Sodom refer to in the Hebrew Bible?
Well, Sodom's a city, that's,
Exactly. Why was it called Sodom though? Was it in the bottom of a valley? Was it on a mountain? Those kind of things really explain far more. The reason I'm saying this, because Ian and I are doing this amazing search into the meaning of place names, in Joshua, where he refers to endless little villages, and every single one of those places refers to regeneration, the path of regeneration, either going downhill or uphill. So Sodom would refer to something in particular.
look, I think I take your point very well. I think you're spot on. You're right. Names in scriptures always have a clue in their meaning as to what they're really on about. No doubt. Again, you can do a short process on it and say, hey, this city was burnt to the ground from fire from heaven. So it can't be a good place. Whatever the sin of Sodom was, it wasn't good.
No, I can see that, but it can point to exactly what.
Jen's throwing me a phone here.
Sodom means flaming burnt furrows, wet fields, demons, beasts.
Did you catch that, guy?
Some of it, yeah.
The meaning is flaming, burnt, furrows, demons, breasts, not beasts. Didn't see that one coming. It says from an unused verb to burn, from the verb sadad to harrow or plow a field, to act violently. So doesn't sound good. Now, then, the other thing you can play with this, if you want to play word games, though, is, Genesis was written by Moses, hundreds of years after the fact. So you could make the call that the name Sodom was given to it after the fact because Moses wrote it in reference to its state, right? It wasn't written as it went. And that's kind of the thing you have to, if you believe in an internal sense, then you believe that Moses was writing those things for good reason. But it's not as if necessarily the people of Sodom knew themselves as Sodom,
No.
Right?
No, but I mean, the whole thing, the whole point of the Jews going to that area was because that area was the perfect example or description of
Sure.
our regenerative path. So those things happened at those particular places because of what they represented spiritually.
Correct. It didn't happen on a mountaintop.
No, it couldn't have happened anywhere else in the world.
Well, that's not true. The writings do tell us that the word could have been written elsewhere. Yeah. We have that teaching that it could have been written elsewhere by different people. It would have come out differently.
Yes.
But the children of Israel wanted this job. So you're half right.
But it would be a different outcome. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
That wasn't the Lord's intention. That wasn't the Lord's intention.
Well, I'll send you the passage on that. It's interesting. It makes you think. Sometimes you get what you want, not necessarily what the Lord set up. Anyway, objection number 4. How can it be adultery? How many of you know somebody who's in a same-sex relationship that's been there for a long time and it seems all, up on the up and up? How can this be adultery? And there we go. This is the argument. Adultery is about breaking a vow or a promise or a covenant. It's about divisiveness as opposed to oneness. It's about breaking trust. In the modern vernacular, adultery is the act of cheating on someone. Other definitions of adultery in the writings are broader, including any forms of licentiousness, promiscuity, and lasciviousness. This is keeping with Jesus' redefinition of the term adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So it is not just the act of sexual infidelity that can destroy a marriage, it's also adultery in the heart, right? So the thrust of this argument is that adultery is narrowly or more broadly defined as cheating in one form or another. And so therefore, how can homosexuality be adultery? Because there's no cheating involved if you have a stable monogamous same-sex relationship. Okay.
But isn't adultery also making something, making what the Lord has made clean unclean?
Would you like to sit here?
Sorry. Sorry. No, I didn't mean it. Sorry. I didn't mean. I know.
You're jumping the gun. I know it. It's
Sorry.
okay. It's okay.
But
I'm just teasing you.
I
Couldn't resist. So again, they'll say, how you're not going to go to hell over homosexuality because the greatest delight in committing adultery with many women isn't the delight of the homosexual. Everyone in hell is opposed to marriage love. And if you have a same-sex marriage, well, they're not opposed to marriage if they are married, right? So can you really push it as adultery? So the response to that, this is what Cliff was trying to say. Adultery is from the word adultare, to pollute, to defile, a word formed ultimately from Latin elements of ad and alter. Adultery in common language as involving the dilution or mixture of pure things with impure things, which is the fundamental problem with homosexual sex. Examples that may be familiar to you are the plate of lovely chocolate brownies, maybe just a little arsenic or animal feces mixed in, you know, that kind of stuff. So the idea here is, and it's, if you look at the writings, adultery is defined in broader terms than just relationship infidelity. Adultery in the world is, oh, somebody cheated on their spouse. That's correct, but that's just not how the writings use it. They give adultery a larger umbrella, and it's about this polluting or defiling, mixing pure things with impure things. So, as an example, all right, with the voice of her whoredom, she profaned the land. She committed adultery with stone and wood. So that's from the Bible itself. It's an example showing that adultery goes beyond just male and female spousal issues kind of things. You can commit adultery with inanimate objects. Yeah. Well, you know, it's stone and wood. What is it? It's idol worship, right? It's stuff that you've made. That's what it is.
Not necessarily sexual type of thing.
Correct. Correct.
Also adulterating stone, truth, and wood, good.
Yep. So you're mixing something pure with something impure. You have a love, but you're putting it on something that you made, not something that's what God is telling us to love.
Where I was picturing somebody made a table using stone. How was that? Okay.
Yeah. Idols. Yeah. Idols. That's always the answer in the Old Testament. Idolatry is bad. That is the fundamental answer there.
Todd, I have a question about the lascivious, etc., being adultery.
Okay.
Pardon me if I'm getting too graphic for anyone, but if there's a married couple that consensually agrees to anything other than what you might consider normal sex or whatever, like anal sex or whatever, would you consider that adultery?
That's a good question. I don't know that the writings define it as such, but like you're probably familiar with the quote in Conjugal Love. It says, you know, what lovers do in their own bedroom is kind of up to them. Right. So there is that gives married couples some liberty to shake things up, shall we say. But there's also the argument that, well, if adultery is mixing pure things with impure things, then yeah, it goes down that path.
But maybe it's not impure if it's consensual between a couple, a heterosexual couple is in love. Like, it's just a question for me.
right. And
Like that we're choosing to define what's pure and impure by maybe our discomfort with things that we haven't done or whatever.
well, the argument, particularly with the anal sex, is that you have the man's seed being mixed with waste matter. And so you have something that's regarded throughout the Book of Kindred Love as holy, contains the soul, holiest material, all that kind of pure stuff being mixed with waste. And so therefore you have the mixing of something pure with something impure. That is the definition of adultery. Is it adultery by cheating? No. Is it going to take you to hell? You know, maybe not. Is this a good idea? I mean, to me, and I don't want to get into my opinions on things. I want to stay to what the writings say. And I don't think the writings, I think the writings give it license within within a heterosexual relationship. I think there is room you could squeeze it in. I don't think it encourages the behavior though either. So.
I feel like something like that, like so many other things, just comes back to intentions, and like the Lord sees our hearts, not our actions so much, you know?
Right.
What you're saying, Jen?
The Lord sees our actions, or sorry, sees our intentions, not just the action. And
Yeah.
therefore it has to be judged on that, which, yeah, that's kind of the where this whole thing ends up, right? You know, it's about your intentions as much as anything. But you know, the reality is when we do something, it makes it itself part of us. And so you may not intend anything bad, but to the extent you do bad things, they become part of you, and it makes it harder to get rid of them later down the line. So there's lots you can do and, shall we say, get away with it. And yet there's also this constant calling to be better. So yeah, it's the goal here isn't to see how much we can get away with. The goal is to figure out what it is we should be doing. And so just to get back to the whole adultery thing, since it's a much happier topic, kind of the response to this idea of how can homosexuality be adultery is in this other quotes in Arcana. You see that in 8904, committing adultery means beyond unlawful body coupling. There are definitions beyond that. Adulteries are about falsifications and perversions. And so the idea here is, in the writings, the term adultery includes activities beyond marital infidelity. Hence, sodomy can, yes, legitimately be a subset of adulterous behaviors. We are, again, just trying to use the writings to see how they define their own terms. I think the result is, you know, all right, the hypothesis was adultery is about breaking a vow, a promise, blah, blah, blah. But the issue is the writings identify it as adultery. It's very clear. And if you define adultery as just breaking a vow or a promise, you could use that same logic to justify incest, polygamy, pedophilia, because you've made a vow, you know, you've decided to become one. You know, what happens when the 30-year-old decides he wants to date the 15-year-old and they form a relationship? You know, is that adultery? No, maybe not as the world would define it, but the writings would, because she's not of age. So I don't think it holds as homosexuality isn't adultery by the definition of the writings. Is it adultery by a modern court of law? No. Is it adultery by common use of the word? No. And that's, I think, one of the problems the new church has in trying to tell a 20-year-old, hey, this is bad, this is adultery. And they go, what? This is adultery? What are you talking about? There's no cheating involved. I understand why that is confusing, but that is not how the writings define the term. So it's almost 12. Look at this one at least. So what makes conjugal love? Here's the argument. What makes conjugal love? Male and female were created to be the very image of the marriage between good and truth. Thus, two together form a single image, which imitates the conjugal model of good and truth. We see that it imitates this model because it is not identical, but similar. Similarly, the relationship between divine love and the divine wisdom, or the Father and the Son, in the Lord is referred to as a marriage, one that is not apparently based on gender or sex. The marriage of goodness and truth can also be represented by other relationships that don't have to do with gender, such as the heart and the lungs, pairs in the human body, pairs in the word, the bread and the wine of the Holy Supper. Brothers like Jacob and Esau also represent goodness and truth, because the will is joined to the understanding, as in a marriage, the person is regenerate. These two states are the subject in the internal sense in these instances involving Jacob and Esau. Okay, so they're saying, well, you don't have, gender and sex aren't the prereqs for having conjugal love. They're not the standard. You can have good and truth pairs elsewhere, is again the argument. You can kind of play this out and say, well, all right, what are the essential characteristics of conjugal love? And say, well, monogamy, consent, spirituality, selfless love, commitment, similarities, and complementary differences. I am not going to drill down to each one of these. I started doing that, and I thought we will never, ever finish this presentation if we go through each one of these things. So the idea is, though, these are the essences of conjugal love. That's the argument being made. And therefore, you could have those things within a same-sex relationship and have conjugal love. The response to that goes like this. The argument here is that all these qualities are just as possible in homosexual reunions as they are in heterosexual ones. The same argument might be made from the appearance of these things in other sexual relationships, such as polygamy, incest, and other forms of adultery. Since homosexuality is called adultery in the writings, these characterizations cannot be applied the same way that they are in marriages between a man and a woman. If you ever take a course in logic, if you dig into computer programming, you could see that this wouldn't hold up as this argument that same-sex relationships can be conjugal love doesn't hold up, because it's already, by the terms of the writing, defined as adultery. So once it's defined as adultery, you don't pass go, and you can't make the argument that, oh no, it is conjugal love because you've backfilled stuff into it. It's already off the track. It's already off the flow chart in this direction. You can't bring over here. It doesn't start with what makes conjugal love, right? And then you say it's these qualities, and therefore you can have it in these ways. So I understand that people are trying to make a case that this behavior is okay. I don't think this is good scholarship to make that case, because the writings have already said this is adultery. This is an evil not to be named. This is an evil, it's a crime against nature. There's all these things saying this isn't good. You can't just take this and say, well, but it has all these qualities to it. There's an interesting thing here in DLW I want to show you that I think speaks to this. I'll just start with the second paragraph there. The essence of love is that what is ours should belong to someone else. Feeling the joy of someone else as joy within ourselves, that is loving. Feeling the joy of someone else as joy within ourselves, that's loving. So hold that in your head. Feeling joy in others, though, and not theirs in ourselves, is not loving. That is loving ourselves, while the former is loving our neighbor. These two kinds of loves are exact opposites. True, they both unite us, and it does not seem as though loving what belongs to us or loving ourselves in the other is divisive. Yet it is so divisive that to the extent that we love others in this way, we harbor hatred for them. Step by step, our union with them dissolves and love becomes hatred of corresponding intensity. So the charge here is, while a relationship might have monogamy, consent, commitment, some similarities and stuff, the writings are saying we should not deceive ourselves, and that we can deceive ourselves by loving others in a way that makes it really loving ourselves. Feeling our joy in others and not theirs in ourselves is not loving. And this is divisive. And this whole idea of, don't judge, right? Whenever you talk about homosexuality, somebody says, oh, don't judge, right? That's the first, it's like a reflex. Don't judge. True states of conjugal love may lie hidden from even the view of the people who are in a given marriage. And so likewise, the lack of these states may be hidden as well, only to be revealed in the spiritual world. We simply can't judge by external appearances or even by our feelings of self-identification, since these are often imposed on us by spirits. So if someone's saying these qualities are present in a homosexual relationship, the answer can very well be, well, don't judge. You can't judge whether that relationship has spirituality in it, just in the same way you can't judge whether somebody's going to hell or not. That line cuts both ways. You can't see two guys together in a 20-year relationship and say, oh, well, they're not going to do. No. That you can't make that call. And the point is that even if there's some external appearances of things looking fine, it doesn't always tell us the truth about what lies underneath. Only the Lord can inform us. To me, the real answer to this is that it's what makes a marriage is the union of souls. And the union of souls is only possible between opposite sex partners. That's very clear. CL 55 says there is love between men. It's not the same as love between a man and a woman. It just isn't. So even though you can say, yes, two men can love each other and they can, in this country get married, they can do all these things. On a deeper level, the writings are saying they cannot connect in as deep of a way as a man and woman can connect. And therefore, it doesn't make the standard of what's able to be a real marriage, where you have these complementary differences of goodness and truth.
That makes so much sense, because if you look at love as being like milk, if you're pouring love out, it needs a container of sort to be useful. And conversely, if you've got lots of containers but nothing to put in it, i.e. love in them, that's not useful either. And that's what homosexual relationships are about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that. Is it what they're about? I mean, it's what they look.
I'm not saying, Todd, that I think that when they get the other side, if the intent is to have a conjugal relationship, love with another,
Yep.
then we are given, I think we are given that opportunity to see it for how it really should be expressed.
Yeah.
And that opportunity then happens. But because we don't know the motive for a lot of those homosexual relationships. I don't believe for 1 minute that that everyone's born that, well, you know, those that are born that way, not everyone. I think it's a choice, it's influence, peer pressure, you know, horrible relationships with parents or others that can produce that.
Yep.
So there's the opportunity for it to be a proper conjugal relationship once we get into the world of spirits.
Well, they say we're born with a clean slate.
Wow, that's
No,
no.
no.
Who says that?
Psychologists say that.
No.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's what they tell us.
Yeah.
We're born with a clean slate.
No, that's not what the writings say.
Yeah, I understand that too.
So yeah, look, I want to finish that setup, just that section, because there are a couple of last points before we move back to what Gay was saying. So loving consensual monogamous marriages, it's based on observation. We shouldn't be deceived by these appearances. I guess that was all there was for that section. But look, it does get hard because, you know, as you see the general thing we're seeing with these objections and the responses to them is that it doesn't really hold that you can excuse the behavior as a good one based on what the writings say. I mean, that to me is clear. The hard part is, well, then what? Because I don't know if it was Gay or Cliff, somebody just said a minute ago, like, well, some people, they feel like they're born this way. Some people feel like they've been abused, and they probably have been. One of the things that I've had happen at clergy meetings is they brought in some guys who wanted to talk about this. And these are not clergymen, these are lay people who have been part of the church their whole lives. And they say, hey, I didn't want this. This is my story. And these guys have they have been very transparent, more transparent than I would have ever thought possible. And they've told the story of their lives and how they got to this place. Suffice it to say, huge, massive amounts of abuse were part of the story. Stuff done to them that nobody should have done to them. So the question then is, if we say the writings say this behavior isn't good, but we have a person here who has this done to them, well, then what? You know, I think that's kind of what Margaret was saying about, well, I'm here about the people, the compassion, whatever. And it's like, those are fair comments and concerns. I'm not trying to say we don't have compassion and whatnot, but we do need to understand what it is we're dealing with. And as you look down these lists of objections, I don't think you can make a case from the writings that they say there's anything good here. You know, could you say the Lord allows it via permission? Can you say that, you know, they can work this out in the next life? You know, all those things. Yeah, there's lots of room for that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing so far is it doesn't really hold scholarship wise. I'm going to do this objection 6 because it's a quick one. And the idea is that there's no harm to self and others by engaging in this. Basically, you know, that's the argument, right? It doesn't harm anybody. But if it's a form of adultery, and adultery is something from, by definition, from hell, you know, harm is going to naturally follow. Now, it might not be lightning bolts from heaven going to come zap you or whatever, you know, but it doesn't work out well. And this fun conjugal love here, 230, says, to the degree that a person's conjugal love wanes, and is lost, remember, by the writing's terms, these doesn't have any love, his character approaches that of an animal. The reason is that more and more a person is in a state of continued love, the more spiritual he is, and the more spiritual he is, the more human he is. And, you know, what's the argument from a person who's involved in those behaviors? This is how I feel, right? I feel, and you can't say that they don't. That's fair. And the writings do say we are born into evils of every kind. So somebody's going to be really predisposed towards stealing. Somebody's going to be predisposed towards lying. These are, you know, all these things, but we don't say those things are good just because somebody is inclined to it. You know, if somebody comes to my office and says, boy, Todd, you know, I've been an alcoholic for the past 20 years and I've been beating my wife all the time, but guess what? I've stopped beating my wife. Great. Does that mean the alcoholism's good? No. It still doesn't make that good, even if they've made progress. Maybe they don't need to deal with that first. Correct. They need to start dealing with the beating of their wife first. Yeah. But it doesn't mean the alcoholism is good because they stopped doing that. You know, it's
the action, isn't it? It's the action of smoking and the results from that.
Oh, yeah, the drinking, right. So
As it is about him stopping beating her. It's
right.
Action.
Right. So what it gets back to is there is harm to self. It just might take a while. I'll show you this one about vastation. This isn't about homosexuality. This is about prostitution. It says there are girls who have been misled into prostitution and so have been persuaded there is nothing evil about it, but who are of a decent disposition in every other respect, because they have not yet reached the age when they are able to recognize and judge that way of life for themselves. They have an instructor with them, extremely strict, who punishes them as often as their thoughts turn to such loose behavior. This man they fear exceedingly. In this way they are vastated. But grown women who have been prostitutes and have enticed others to be so do not undergo vastation, but are in hell. Straight to hell, you know, right? So my point is, sorry?
Epstein.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So brothel madams will definitely go to hell.
Sure looks that way. Yeah.
Wow.
So look, my point isn't whether who goes to hell or not. My point in that is vastations are no fun. And there are plenty of other examples in the writings about it that yes, somebody does X, Y, Z, they get vastated and they come out of it and they go through onward. To me, it doesn't hold that they're not doing harm to themselves by engaging in a behavior that is not of a heavenly character. You are doing harm to yourself. Maybe not right away. You smoke one cigarette. Are you harming yourself? You do it for years and years. Eventually, you're going to have lung problems, right? It's just, we put warnings on the cigarette packs for a reason, saying, hey, one ain't going to kill you, but you make this a habit and it's not going to lead you to anywhere good. I think that's the message with homosexuality is, okay, in and of itself, is it going to take you to hell? No. But boy, you're not making your life easier. And, I know I've said this to the local folks here before, but, the spiritual world, the way it works is thought brings presence.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of this world is to refine your thinking in a way so that when you get to the next world, you bring good presence into your life. If I go up into the next world and all I'm thinking about are brothels and that kind of stuff, guess where I'm going to go? Guess what's going to be attracted to me? Is that going to turn out well for me? No. And so therefore, I have to train my brain to think a certain way so that it turns out good for me. Could I deal with this in the next world? Sure. Is it going to be more difficult? Yes, because of the speed at which things work. You think about it and then bang, you're there. Versus here, I can, have an image on the TV screen flash up about pretty girls, and I can choose to say, whoa, wait, whoa, stop. let's go play Yahtzee, to go do something else, right? Get my mind off those things so that that doesn't actually manifest. And I think that's the issue here with homosexuality is that, as you make that habitual in your life, you're not making it easy on yourself. That to me is where this goes. Now, I want to leave you on that kind of a note of, there is mercy to be had on this, but I also want you to see that, there's the writings don't have anything great to say about it. There are mercies in the fact of, as people have said before, intentions, and there's mercy in ignorance. If you don't know it's a bad thing, that's helpful to your cause. Lots of other stuff, and we'll get into more of that next time, but at least we've laid a foundation on what the writings say, and some of these, what I say, arguments where people try to take the writings that mean something other than I think they do. I'll open the floor here. I know it's 1:15. Does anybody want to say something here? And right, how do I do that? Yeah.
Just one more thing. There's, what do we say to somebody? Thinking of somebody told me about Mark, the husband, Vanessa. He tried everything possible to fight some sexual tendencies, and so on, but we couldn't.
Yep.
Right.
So for those of you online, what Owen's asking is, what do you say to somebody who has fought this and done everything that they think they can think of to fight it and still has it, right? Yeah. Yeah, that is.
But I think not totally accurate. I think he's still trying. It's not as though he's given up.
Okay, so Margaret adds in that this person hasn't given up on fighting it, but what do they do? And look,
I think he believes it's hereditary. He looks back in his ancestry.
look, and that's very possible that there's some hereditary component to it. I mean, I think for someone like that, where I feel comfort for them is the fact that they are still in the game. Their conscience hasn't been destroyed, right? And to the extent they don't intend these things and they hold themselves accountable, they're going to be fine. And I think that's the key. Again, that's a passage for next month, but we are going to give you a special preview, and that it's a big deal that to the extent that you don't intend it for yourself and you hold yourself accountable to it, the writings say that sin is not imputed to you. So to that person, you can say, well, hang in there, you're doing the right thing. And as long as you keep doing that, your eternal fate will be fine. I think that's fair. And it's a fine line because you don't want to encourage the behavior, saying, oh yeah, just go ahead and do it. But to the extent that they say, I shouldn't be doing this, they're excused. And this is what a lot of the stuff next time gets into is, well, what is it? Is it a mental illness? Is it a temptation that they can't withstand? There are things, mitigating teachings that say, well, even though this isn't good, is it, how big of a deal is it? So yeah, that's where it gets fun. And this is where I think I said in the newsletter about this push and pull between diagnosis versus treatment. And I find that a lot of people get hung up saying, oh, this is evil. You need to know this is evil. And then you have the other people say, but this person, they're struggling, blah, 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 blah. And there's this compassion element. And as a result, the two just kind of keep missing each other because the diagnosis people want you to know that it's evil. Okay, if we acknowledge and understand that this is not regarded in the writings as a good thing, then what? Now, if we agree on that, how do we deal with compassionately treating these people? And how do we help them in their journey? And this gets back to the opening slide I showed about, the flow chart of diagnosis. If we diagnose that this is a sore, well, okay, well then is it a white sore or black sore? Is it this guy? Yeah, right. All these things. What has it got? And that's kind of the realm we're going to be entering into more going forward. Okay, well, the guy is engaged in this behavior, doesn't want to be, and knows he shouldn't. Then what's the outcome? Well, the outcome is the angels don't hold that sin imputable to them. So it's okay. Well, then how do you deal with that? Then you have all sorts of logistical problems of how do you deal on a practical basis. If we say, oh, well, then it's okay if they're fighting and don't acknowledge it. Well, then what do you do as far as having a church and welcoming and not welcoming and all this other stuff? Oh, I don't want my kids to be seeing two guys together holding hands in church because it's a bad image, example. It becomes a royal mess. But that is where we're at.
What is the size of that petition that's going on? So, is it, I think in Sydney or Australia, the church has been split.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it potential split in the church?
So Owen's asking about the petition that went around on social media a few months ago and saying, is there potential for a church split within the general church?
It's not social media, it's been sent to the general church, it's been sent to the bishops.
Yeah, but it's circulated on social media to get signatures.
Well, the bishop, okay, I see, but the bishop actually.
I would just like to say, my father is not a clone. I see him every day, and he.
Oh, yeah, those are speakers, I think. So, yeah, is there potential to split the church? Yeah, I think there is. I don't know how high of a percentage, how likely it is, but I think there is a reasonable way. I mean, there's definitely, you can see posturing within the organization of people who think this is a stand on the hill and die for it moment. I don't think it's particularly likely, but I can see a path to it. Sure.
I feel like there's either going to be a schism or an exodus. That people, there's no middle ground to it. It feels like to me.
See, I don't think, I can agree with everything you said. I don't disagree that homosexuality is, it's not right.
Right.
I go along with that. So for me, it's the more you talk about it and the more you say it's good, it's bad, all that type of thing.
Yep.
You're judging in a segment. I feel like, well, I'm judging those people. So I feel like what I need to do is live my life compassionately and as good as and kind as I can. So then I would think it's not really my business what those people, if people are having those behaviours, whatever. If I come in contact with somebody and they're being useful and I can interact, well then that's not for me to say I'm not going to see that person because they're homosexual. So that's where my dilemma is. I want to live the Lord's teachings, and so I'm feeling it's very easy to talk about it and say, oh, you're not judging the person. But if you're not including them, then you are judging them. You're excommunicating them from coming to the being welcome. And I think that's what that petition, a lot of it's about, is you're not welcome. I don't agree with all the things they want to do, but the welcoming part of it.
So for the online folks, Margaret's saying, hey, my job in life is to do me and not to worry about what everybody else is doing, and that my role isn't to be a person of judgment. It's just to live life compassionately and kindly and not exclude people. Is that fair?
Yeah, basically.
Is that fair? You know,
And lumping everybody in that group the same, some of them probably are pretty disgusting and whatever, but others aren't. So you're judging a group, kind of putting people in a box.
that I agree with completely. Some people are there for different reasons and different things. This is part of what makes it difficult. This is all true.
Have you seen how they act in the gay Mardi Gras?
Oh God, please. Let's not. Yeah.
I don't agree with this.
I feel the same with you, Margaret, but I think that I'm very much in favor of making them a part of our lives. I think the problem comes for the church because it has to stand by its principles. I don't see any reason why the church can't welcome them, but make it very clear that these are what we believe in. And if those homosexual couples or any of that range start to become uncomfortable, then it's up to them to leave, not try and change us because of our principles and belief that what we're studying is wrong. So, you know, I would say don't put them in positions of any power.
Well, then you get accused of not being accommodating again.
Well, that's tough, isn't it?
I agree, exactly. I agree too.
Well,
as far as the church is concerned, they're doing it for the right reasons.
Right. Look, it is tough. That much I get. And the kind of the niggle I have with the whole, well, I just need to be compassionate, is part of compassion is teaching the truth.
Yeah.
You know, if the man on the watchtower doesn't say, hey, enemies are coming, everybody get ready. Oh, but all my army's asleep. I want to be compassionate and let them sleep and get a good night's sleep. Well, that's not actually very compassionate when your whole city gets taken over and plundered. So to me, the Lord's very clear in the scriptures that the watchman who falls asleep, well, guess what? It's his fault when the city gets taken over. And, you know, particularly for me as a pastor, I feel like, well, that's my job. It's diagnosis. It's the watchman. It's like, look, you know, I got to put it out there saying, this is what the teachings say. What you guys choose to do with it, well, of course, that's up to you. But yeah, it is the job of the church to put these things out there.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. But as an individual, we can choose to have those friends. I'll give you an example. We went out for a birthday celebration with a friend of the family, and of my family, in fact, and two of her friends were a homosexual couple, men. And I specifically asked them because I knew that my girlfriend, enjoyed their company. Now, their relationship's got nothing to do with me. They're nice guys, and I can put aside what they do. They're in a long-term relationship that may or may not, you know, go on. But as far as I'm concerned, I invited them because they're her friends. It made her happy to have them there. And that was the important thing. And I didn't have any problem, you know, as I never do with talking with them.
So
and I don't like, but I'm not involved in that. So
you didn't tell them that they were committing an act that's a contrary to nature and that they were, you didn't do that?
I suspect that they know that deep down in their hearts, they know that.
Maybe so. And maybe they don't. And if they don't know it and they don't think it's a bad thing, that's actually an okay place to be spiritually, right? You know, that's kind of one of the generosities that's happening in the world these days. To the extent that we don't think it's bad, then maybe it isn't as bad as it would be otherwise. So
It's like we're not avoiding listening to. I think we
Right.
need to know the other point of view, don't we?
yeah, that's fair to know those things.
So
So
it's good that we've had this conversation because we're hearing the other side of the argument.
well, that's the point, is to let some of these arguments be put out there. And like I said, we'll get into more of this softer side of it next time, but at least we have some of the stuff presented out there. That what happened at clergy meetings, I thought might be useful for everybody to see.
Yeah,
So
great.
we are well over time, but it was probably a good
No, that
time.
was a good talk.
Yeah.
Very
So-
well, very good.
I will sign you all out. Thanks for joining, Roz and Gay and
Bye,
Margaret.
Roz. Good seeing you, Dave.
Bye, ladies. Bye, Margaret.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you.